Hey everyone, it's vmcampos, comic book fan. Welcome to the weekly vmcampos Comic Book Club. This is a video series where I answer, what am I reading this week? For the audio-only version of the podcast, head on over to iTunes or Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you get all your fine podcasts from. This is the series where I review a comic book, new or old, from my collection, and I talk about the cover, the interior art, the story, and the enjoyability of the book. This week I've got Beasts of Burden, The Presence of Others, number 1. Now the creative team is Evan Dorkin and Jill Thompson. Dorkin is the writer, Thompson is the artist. Jill Thompson also did the cover. So first of all, the cover is amazing. We've got this monochromatic black and red and white cover with a variety of animals. There's some dogs, some Dobermans, terriers and pugs, I guess, tabby cats, etc., some weird crows, and it's like very foreboding. If you don't know about this series, Beasts of Burden, it's basically supernatural cats and dogs fighting the forces of evil with psychic powers. It's a really cool series, and this cover is really cool. I give it a 5 out of 5. It's a really, really nice cover. As a matter of fact, I have issue 1 and 2 at the moment, but I've only read number 1 to review it. And so far with issue 1 and 2, they form a beautiful diptych, 2 covers that form this horrendous blood-dripping skull with the main characters within that skull. It seems that the copyright is 2016, Jill Thompson, but this series was released in 2019, so I guess this was something that was kind of held back for a little while. So this visually striking cover, even by itself, I would rate it a 5 out of 5. Spoiler alert, I will be going through the book, but I will not be revealing all the major plot points. Make sure to buy the original comic yourself. Support your favorite companies and creators. So where to begin? As I said, yeah, it's a supernatural story with these cats and dogs. Dorkin and Thompson created the characters back in 2003 or so, and it was about, a short little 8-page story about, like, spooky shenanigans. And since then, there have been various collaborations between them and other artists filling in the story. So, let's talk about the plot. It's really nice. It's, like, very scary, it's ominous, it's well plotted and paced. A group of humans is visiting Burden Hill, the hometown of these magical dogs, the wise dogs. And they're basically a family of ghost hunters. There's Sabine, the dad, and her brother Russell. They got hired unofficially to visit Burden Hill and do a little bit of investigating. I like how it starts off. Sabine is writing to her mom, not fully explain what's going on, but she seems to be estranged, and she's kind of catching up. Dad got a call from someone he knew in college who's sheriff here, all unofficial, of course, the call and the job. As for the town, it's pretty much the usual. Nothing but bad news. Small town full of weird disappearances and murders and desecrations and such, and they're there to sort of investigate. The story is really nice. I give this a 5 out of 5. It really keeps you hooked to see what else is coming up next. What is this evil horror that the animals are revealing that exists in this town? What latest abomination do they have to deal with? The book is pretty violent, actually, so you will see some scary stuff. But the plot and the pacing of it is also very good, so definitely a good read. 5 out of 5. I recommend it. The art is also beautiful, the interior art. It's also by Thompson. She did the interiors. Now I'm used to Jill Thompson's Scary Godmother art a little bit more, which is much more whimsical. This is a very realistic style, works very well. She has beautiful expressions on the animals, the people also perfectly rendered. It's like watercolor or some medium that really shows a variety of tones. It's just wonderful to look at. And again, some of these expressions, you would have never thought animals could emote so well. There's a hilarious shot of a cat being like, uh-oh, they don't know, and that sort of thing. So art is also very, very, very good internal art. So I'd rate that a 5 out of 5 as well. The interesting thing is that there are no black borders around any of the panels. The space between the panels, the gutters, are all white, stark white, unlike a lot of other comics that there is a black border between them. This is all completely white. And also the layout is interesting. It varies from wide panels, tall panels, close-ups, just really beautiful internal art. The enjoyability of the book, also a 5 out of 5. I love this horror stuff, and this is a little bit off the beaten path. It's magical animals banding together to defeat these evils. This is the third Beasts of Burden book that I've read. I've got a couple of other 2 reviews for these other books back in the podcast archives. Don't forget to go check them out. And they've all been very enjoyable. It seems like there's a little bit of a different group in different areas, perhaps, because I didn't quite recognize any of the characters from the previous comic here, although I believe I recognize a cat from 2 series ago. So, very enjoyable. I do recommend it. 5 out of 5. In the video version of the podcast, we're able to see things in more detail, of course. Here, for example, the cover. Again, beautiful expressions on these characters. Each one has their own personality. And then the scary crow over here. You can really get a sense of each of them has their own personality. And the style of the art, like I said, it looks like it's maybe watercolor. These edges sort of make me feel like watercolor, and the cover is again this dripping skull that works really well in the 2 together. So I haven't read number 2 yet, so I can't quite review it yet. But if it's anything like part 1, it's a really good story. So interior art, like I said, it's also very good. Same artist. Look at this. Okay, this, for example, frontispiece right here, there's Pugs, the pug, naturally. And okay, he's out there hanging out. He's cute, he's little, but what's that skull there in the corner of the tree? This is like a lot of the plot of this book, that there's like these fantastical elements just beneath the surface, these really, scary elements in society. And again, I love these expressions. The human characters are also rendered very, very well. Nice and realistic. Each one has their own character. This shot right here of Sabine laying on the grave trying to hear for whispers of the dead is just a beautiful shot. Very evocative in her expression as well. Again, like I said, I'm a little bit more used to Scary Godmother style of art, which is more fantastical. This realism is a welcome change, however. And then you get to the parts where it's like, well, the realistic, the humans plus the animal companions, and each one has their own expression and their style. We don't need those weapons either. We don't bite, not unless we have to. And I like this little sort of recap in these notes here. OMFG, wise dogs. Apprentice is still Ace, a husky, leader, Jack, Rex, Whitney, pugs, duh, plus 2 irritant, etc. This is funny. Wait till ODM hears. Who's ODM? Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. That's a Ghostbusters shout out. And again, look at these wonderful expressions here. They're like cartoony but realistic enough. I love them. There's another great shot over here once the animals kind of talk a little bit about something going on. Some screwed up kid named David Reardon killed by wild dogs in his own house. At least that's the official story. Know anything about it? And I love that expression about, don't really want to tell you. Yeah, we heard about that. As far as we know, it didn't have anything to do with the voices stuff. And you'd be wasting your time. And this cat's like, uh-oh. So there's a really beautiful ominous here. I really had like an ominous soundtrack playing as I got up to this part where the characters are talking to each other, but there's a crow watching. Ominous shot of the crow, and then it flies away. Again, I won't spoil it past this part where everyone splits up. It doesn't turn out well, but you gotta read it yourself. It's really action-packed. It's beautiful visuals, very foreboding art and everything, and a really shocking ending to issue number 1. Can't wait to read issue number 2. Let's jump over to non-spoiler part of the book. That spoils a little bit, so let's move on. And we've got here this great editorial by Dorkin talking a little bit about the history of this series and him and Thompson working together, along with Benjamin Dewey in the subsequent issues. So it's a 5-issue miniseries, and he kind of explains the series, and it's a great synopsis. Shout out to Comics for Kids. Every day is Free Comic Book Day at Comics for Kids, Inc. This is a Seattle book reading library that takes donations. So I highly recommend you send them some donations right over here. There's their contact info, 5009 50th Avenue, Southwest Seattle, Washington 98136, or their website, comicsforkidsinc.org, plus phone numbers. Donate some of your books so that kids can start their own hobby of reading and enjoying comics. Going a little bit further back, we've got an ad for Tom Clancy's The Division, Broken Dawn, Alex Irvine, I don't know anything about this, Black Hammer 45 by Jeff Lemire et al. This is one taking place in World War II. Let's see how far back can we go before anything is spoiled. We can do one more page here. Calamity Kate. So if you're going to reinvent yourself, why not make yourself the most badass monster hunter alive? And lastly, Anthem, A New Universe, the official prequel to the hit video game from BioWare. So if you're into these games and such, maybe go back and read some of the comics and get another perspective on things. That's as far as I can go, or else I'm going to spoil way too much. So to recap, the cover, 5 out of 5. The plot, 5 out of 5. The interior art, 5 out of 5. And the enjoyability of the book, perfect, 5 out of 5. This week I read Beasts of Burden, The Presence of Others, number 1, from Dark Horse Comics, by Evan Dorkin and Jill Thompson with Nate Picos. Very enjoyable book, highly recommended, especially if you're into horror. Great art and story, super enjoyable. If you'd like to hear the audio-only version of the podcast, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your fine podcasts. This has been the weekly VM Campos Comic Book Club, and I'll see you in Burden Hill.